Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. For today's video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at this 1958 Chevrolet Biscayne. This thing is pretty much all original. It has a straight six, a 3-speed manual on the column, no features, no seat belts, no power brakes, no power steering, and best of all, no air conditioning. And it's one of the most fun cars I've ever driven. In this review, I'm going to start it up, show the engine, get an exhaust clip, and go over the performance data. Of course, I'll take it on a thorough drive and show you many of the unique aspects throughout the interior as well as exterior. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start her up, let her run. I'm sure a lot of you would agree that there's nothing quite like the 1950s. Automotive design was being taken to new heights, especially during the late 50s as fin fever started to spread throughout the industry. Competition also began to heat up between domestic brands, so much so that even though Chevrolet completely redesigned their passenger car lineup for 1958, the style lasted just 1 year before being redesigned yet again for 1959. Collectively, the 58 Chevys were dramatically different from the 55 through 57 models. For starters, they were longer, lower, wider, and even a tad heavier. Everything was new from the body structure and chassis to the rear suspension and steering. Between the various models, Chevrolet offered a wide range of body styles that included sedans, hardtops, convertibles, and even wagons. The Biscayne was new for 58, along with the entry model Del Rey and the range-topping Bel Air Impala. It took the place of the previously offered 210 series and was only offered as a 2- or 4-door sedan. It offered upscale looks and some added creature comforts that you typically expect to see on a mid-range car. Depending on the body style and optional extras, the original price would have ranged between $2,236 and $2,397. Cars of the late 50s just had so much personality. It's when automakers were really getting creative and pushing the envelope of what was possible at the time. And what's even cooler, unlike nowadays, if you drove the most basic form of transportation, which again for the full-size line was the Del Rey, you didn't have to skimp on upscale styling touches. It looked pretty much identical to the Biscayne with just a little bit less chrome. That's pretty awesome. 14-inch steel wheels were standard across the board. The style of wheel cover largely depended on which model you chose. This car originally rode on 7.5 by 14 4-ply tires, but it's since been fitted with more modern radials. Underpinning the 58 Chevys was an all-new safety girder frame which featured X-type construction with 3 crossmembers and a center tube. It increased torsional rigidity by 30% over their predecessors' longitudinal side rails. The front independent suspension was mostly carried over, aside from improving anti-dive properties. But the rear suspension changed from traditional leaf springs to coils with 3 control arms per side. All of the changes helped create a car that rode better than its predecessor, but still retained good overall stability. Chevrolet even offered a 4-corner air suspension for these cars. An updated version of Chevrolet's ball race steering system repositioned the shaft and linkages ahead of the front wheels. The addition of new friction-cutting nylon bushings also helped improve feel and lessen the effort. Even without power steering, it doesn't take near as much effort to pilot as you might think. Only at low speeds and parking lot maneuvers does it become more of a chore. Power steering was an optional feature though. However, when we're talking about classic cars, my preference tends to lean more towards manual steering. The powered systems can feel too loose sometimes, whereas the manual always feels tight and communicative. The powered systems are primarily for comfort and ease of use, which they excelled at. Handling can be interesting. If you see a suggested speed through corners, it's a good idea to abide by it, or perhaps even go a bit under as there's significant body roll. You can really feel the weight as it lifts back and forth. It really is almost like driving a boat. This car wasn't built for handling though, it was built to be comfortable and eat up the highway miles, which it definitely does. Stopping power is provided by 11-inch hydraulic drum brakes at all four corners. Power-assisted brakes were optional. The brakes take a lot of time to get used to. You have to plan your stops well in advance and be more mindful of the people in front of you. Panic stops can easily induce lockup, but when driven normally and a good firm press of the pedal, the brakes do a pretty decent job at stopping such a large car without a large amount of fade or side-to-side movement. Chevrolet had a lot of engines and transmissions at its disposal in '58. For the full-size car lineup, there are 18 powertrain combinations to choose from. The base setup was the Blue Flame 235.5 cubic inch inline 6-cylinder with a single barrel carburetor and a 3-speed synchro mesh column-mounted manual transmission. The 6 was the thrifty choice if you prioritized economy over outright performance. You can even order it for a Bel Air Impala. It's not very powerful, but it has a lot of character. Gross output was rated at 145 horsepower at 4,200 RPM and 215 pound-feet of torque at 2,400 RPM. 60 miles an hour comes on eventually as acceleration is leisurely at best. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. The column-mounted manual, commonly referred to as 3 on the tree, is incredibly fun. I've driven a handful of cars with this type of transmission, and it's something I've grown quite fond of over the years. If you've never had experience with one, it's surprisingly easy to operate. The 3 forward gears plus reverse are oriented into an H pattern. There aren't any performance advantages to having it on the column, but it does make the driving experience more engaging. For better fuel economy at higher speeds, Chevrolet also offered a synchro mesh with a 2-speed overdrive. If you preferred to let the car do its own thing, a Powerglide 2-speed automatic was available. V8s are obviously more valuable in the collector world, but straight 6s have almost become a lost art. It's a pretty awesome thing to see nowadays. The V8 options for the Biscayne and other models included several variants of the venerable 283 and an all-new 348 engine that developed up to 280 horsepower. Stepping up to the V8s also unlocked the option of Chevrolet's Turboglide 3-speed automatic. All powertrain combinations sent power to the rear wheels through an open differential unless you decided to spring for posi traction, which added a limited slip differential that would transfer power to the wheel on the opposite side if one wheel lost traction. Aside from the inherent differences that come with different body styles, pretty much all of Chevrolet's full-size passenger cars in '58 had the same interior design. The Biscayne, being a mid-range model, was quite a bit nicer than the Del Rey, which didn't even have door armrests, but it wasn't near as glitzy as the Bel Airs and Impalas, which offered nicer interior finishers and more amenities. I just love how simple and straightforward everything is. It just goes to show you how complicated cars have gotten over the years. I also find it pretty cool that at some point in time, you could order a car this big that could seat up to 6 adults comfortably and still have a manual transmission. Sitting on the bench seat is like sitting on a couch. There's a lot of padding but not a lot of support. To optimize pedal reach, you can also move the seat forward and backward. On the right side of the dash, there's a locking glove box with 2 drink coasters. The vent windows are especially helpful if the car didn't have air conditioning in the first place. You can open and close them to improve interior ventilation, in conjunction with the fresh air vents located in the bottom kick panels. Air conditioning was an optional feature in 1958. This one doesn't have it, but it does have a heater with defrost. There's no mistaking the fact that this is a big car, but it's not big just for the sake of being big. It's functional and highly practical. The interior, for instance, is cavernous. It needs to be if you're going to seat up to 6 people. And if you're around 6 feet or over, you're going to have plenty of headroom, legroom, and plenty of room to stretch out. When I climb on in, I'm 5'10". You can see that there's no issue with ingress and egress at all. The back seat is a lot more comfortable than the front. It actually conforms to your body a little bit and wraps around you. You have an ashtray back there, a coat hook on top, and that's pretty much it. Other optional features that you could get for the Biscayne included a choice of radios, a powered front seat, power windows, and more. Now let's go ahead and see how she sounds. The thing about full-size cars of this era is that you're bound to have a huge trunk, and all of that space really comes in handy when the car in question can seat up to 6 people. The Biscayne, for instance, has about 25 cubic feet worth of space. The lift height is very low, the opening is very wide, and for the most part the trunk floor is flat. To help maximize space, the spare tire is tucked to the far right. The trunk lid itself is perfectly counterbalanced to feel feather light whether you're opening or closing. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed the in-depth look at this 1958 Chevrolet Biscayne. Be sure to stay tuned next time, leave a like and subscribe today, there's always a lot more where that came from. Take care everyone.